Great.
Welcome to Pod Save America Live.
Oh, is that what we're calling it?
I just decided to go with it. I felt like it's weird every week we do this. We're like, welcome to the live stream. That's dumb.
I do think welcome to the live stream is
Pretty bad.
letting the air out of the balloon a little.
Welcome to Pod Save America Live. We're taking your questions. And with us is Priyanka,
Hey.
who's going to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Isn't that
all right.
exciting?
We can jump in.
Elijah's here. Travis is here. Nar's here.
got the whole
only
crew.
one of those people doesn't need to be here, but we're happy to have him, and that's
Are we?
Travis. Priyanka's not.
I
There's
didn't
not
say
even
I
a camera
wasn't.
on Travis.
It was just a question. This is a Q&A, I thought.
This is a Q&A. You're right. You're correct, Priyanka.
We can jump in
Let's
if
do
you
it.
guys want.
Please.
All right. We have our first question. It's from a name I can't read. I know there's nothing we can do about the Russia stuff, so talking it to death isn't helpful, but can we talk about the latest Russia stuff and what the hell Paul Manafort thinks he's doing? Where can we possibly go from here?
I'll just start by saying we won an election. You all deserve some Russia stuff.
Not only that, the old thing of there's nothing we can do about the Russia stuff, so talk about other stuff isn't really true anymore because we won the election.
Yeah. So there we are.
So one thing that we, John, you were doing a kind of jokey intro into a real answer that I interrupted.
Well, where were you? I was going to start with what is going on in the Russia stuff.
You do that and then I'll go.
Okay. Some facts. Paul Manafort, who, when we last left our hero, Paul Manafort had entered a guilty plea. He was cooperating with Robert Mueller in the special counsel's office. All was well and good. And then we found out the other day, thanks to Bob Mueller, that Paul Manafort has lied to the FBI and the special counsel's office since he's been cooperating with them, violating the conditions of his plea. So now he doesn't get any leniency in sentencing whatsoever. It would mean that the sentencing would lead to Paul Manafort spending the rest of his life in jail. And now what's happening is Mueller said, okay, you violated the plea. Manafort's lawyers disagree, so they're going to court. They're going to be in front of a judge, and Mueller said he will detail exactly why he knows that Paul Manafort lied and what he lied about to the judge. Sentencing.
I love that every episode ends in a cliffhanger.
I know. Sentencing itself, they think, will take place in February, but they have a meeting this Friday with the judge about scheduling. When the report comes out from Mueller about why Paul Manafort lied, we don't know exactly, but he said it soon. And the other thing we don't know is if that report will be made public or not.
One other thing we don't know is whether or not you can get Hermes ties at the Leavenworth commissary.
It seems unlikely.
The point, the one thing I was going to add is we've gone back and forth on this a lot. This idea that look, the Russia pot. I watched Russia pot never boils, but there is a big change because Democrats now do have some power, and I think one question that should always be on the back of our minds is when do we demand a bill passed to protect Mueller, to protect the special counsel as part of negotiations, whether it's over Trump's dumb wall or an upcoming spending bill or what have you. So now there really is, but for a long time there really wasn't anything substantive for Democrats to do, not to mention the many committees that will now be chaired by Democrats and not craven over, what do you call it when somebody's in over their head people like Devin Nunes in charge of these committees anymore. So you have committee members, you have committee chairs who can decide strategically how to deploy their subpoenas, their resources to get more information to kind of buttress Robert Mueller. And then you have this other bigger question of when do we decide to try to pass something to protect Mueller and jam Republicans who have refused to sign on for something like that.
So you also asked what the hell Paul Manafort thinks he's doing. So a couple options here. Paul Manafort lies during his cooperation. One, he believes he's getting a pardon from Trump. Two, he believes he's telling the truth.
Yeah, okay. Let's put two aside.
That's what he's saying publicly. Three, he believed that Mueller would not find out that he's lying. Four, he believes that he would rather spend the rest of his life in jail than tell the truth.
So
those are the only options.
I think the buckets of he lied by mistake and he's willing to go to jail forever to protect Donald Trump's secrets do not strike me as Manafort-esque.
No, this is very, thriller movie kind of storyline, but the believes he'd rather spend the rest of his life in jail rather than tell the truth is not necessarily to protect Donald Trump, but it is the theory from some that Paul Manafort is so afraid of spilling the Russians' secrets that if he is let free and tells them, that the Russians will somehow find him and kill him. That is the very... It seems a little far-fetched to me. But who knows?
Yeah, you know what? A lot of
We're
things
living
that
in
were...
a fucking...
Yeah, a lot of things were far-fetched before we elected a international idiot criminal president.
A couple other things are interesting here. It is very interesting that Robert Mueller knows that Paul Manafort was lying. We don't know what the lies are. We don't know what they were about. But the fact that Mueller knows he was lying means that Mueller, once again, was a couple of steps ahead of these bad criminals. The other interesting thing we learned is that this whole time that Manafort's been cooperating with Mueller, his lawyers have been telling Donald Trump's lawyers everything. What Bob Mueller asked him, what he's been saying, which is, to say that it's highly unusual is an understatement. Usually you have joint defense agreements with someone when your interests are aligned, because you're both the defendants. When one of those defendants starts cooperating and basically joins the prosecution's team, you don't have those agreements anymore. Now what that means is Mueller can, because the conversations between Trump's lawyers and Manafort's lawyers are not privileged anymore because they are not on the same side. One was supposed to be cooperating. So Mueller can try to find out what was said between those two legal teams. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. The point is, presidents who have nothing to hide tend not to continue to have conversations with people who have pled guilty to crimes that they're associated with. That would be like, it's like, for instance, if let's say you and I were on the same team in a game, all right, and then you're like, actually, now I'm on the other team.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is, the other interesting thing here.
John, you get it?
I do get it.
Because we would be like on the other teams.
Right. That's what I meant. So when Rick Gates started cooperating with the Mueller team, in the cooperation agreement, it said specifically that Gates was not supposed to say a word to anyone about what they were cooperating about.
But Mueller
did not include that in Manafort's agreement.
Right. Well, we learned a little bit about this earlier, right? We knew that there was some communication going on between the Trump team and the Manafort team earlier.
And it seemed like Mueller knew that earlier, too.
Right.
So the question is, why did Mueller, knowing this, that they were probably communicating, and also why did he write a plea agreement that sort of allowed this sort of communication? Some people have speculated Mueller was setting a trap. That seems, again, like quite a legal theory.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of nobody knows.
Right.
And we're always months behind what Mueller is up to. So I think this is a good one to not speculate too wildly about.
The other thing that came out yesterday about the investigation was Jerome Corsi, famous birther, just all around crazy conspiracy theorist, bad guy, friend of Roger Stone, friend of Donald Trump's.
Swift boat guy.
If you're been there at all the bad things.
If you're Priyanka and younger, swift boating was something that happened to John Kerry in 2004. When there was something called Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, which actually lied about John Kerry's service in Vietnam. Jerome Corsi was very much involved in that. That's how I first got to know his back catalog, his oeuvre.
So Mueller has emails between Corsi and Roger Stone showing that they both had knowledge that WikiLeaks was about to dump stolen emails regarding Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, and the Democratic Party. In the statement of events that has been leaked about Corsi, it also says that Corsi and Stone had been in regular contact with the Trump campaign, including Donald J. Trump, which got Trump's lawyers and Trump pretty angry that he was specifically mentioned in the statement.
You know how
So now we're pretty close. Now we have Stone and Corsi knowing about WikiLeaks and talking about and them talking to Trump in the campaign. So we're pretty close to connecting some dots there.
Yes. I would also just say, when you're dealing with, like, when you look at this cast of characters, and it's like Jerome Corsi and
Motley Crue.
Roger Stone, you know, when you go to like a Boston Market or a buffet or a Chipotle and they're getting to the bottom of the chicken, so somebody comes and takes the last little bits of gross chicken that have been out all day, takes them and puts them on top of the new chicken, and then puts the new chicken down so that you can start on the new chicken. And if you're first, you're like, oh, fuck, I'm getting all the old chicken. These are the burnt up, disgusting bits of old chicken. That's who is in running our politics right now. Jerome Corsi, Roger Stone, they're the grimy, overcooked, boiled, gross chicken bits at the bottom of the thing that just got put on top of us.
I imagine that if, and it sounds like when that has happened to you in the past, you are the type of person who says, please take that first scoop of chicken and dump it out because I don't want the old chicken. I can imagine you saying
You
that.
can imagine. I will say that I tend not to do that. I will say that if I am at a Boston Market and we're looking at some old green beans that are kind of a little more gray and a little less green, I'll say, can we get some fresh green beans? Can we get some nice, plump green beans?
I miss Boston Market.
I'd miss it if I went less.
Where is it? Is it close
It's
by?
in New York.
Oh, too
There's
bad.
one I go to.
Okay, anyway,
There's a Boston
back to
Market.
the live stream.
Look, I travel a lot, and sometimes I go to Boston Market in New York. It's not a big deal. I don't like to brag about my bi-coastal lifestyle, but I go to my favorite places in New York, and one of them is Boston Market.
It's a good stream. I like it.
Any other Boston Market questions, Priyanka?
Not that I see on the list, but I'll take some from Twitter. But we can move on
Please.
to shutdown, Schumer, Pelosi.
Oh, yeah.
This question is from Bill, who is asking, what are your thoughts on Chuck Schumer offering $1.6 billion to Trump for border security? And can you explain the pros and cons of this offer and strategy, whatever it may be?
Do we have a fart noise button?
So I have to say, I saw a lot of the outrage over the $1.6 billion. I saw the clarification from Chuck Schumer. I saw a lot of people saying, why are you just offering $1.6 billion? Why would that be your beginning position of money for nothing? Why, after we won an election, would the first thing you do say, we reached an old deal where you get some money for nothing? And I thought there must be some sophisticated explanation sitting beneath it, some argument for why this is the right strategy. John?
Here's the reasoning.
Is there one?
Here would be the Schumer camp's reasoning. First, there was a little mishap on Twitter, as sometimes there is, where the CNN reporter who reported this said that Schumer said $1.6 billion for a wall. It is not for a wall. The CNN reporter was wrong. It's $1.6 billion for fencing. And so the Schumer people will say,
You
okay,
guys
first
see
of
my
all,
eyes roll?
the $1.6 billion is, it says in the legislation, whatever, it's for fencing. Trump wanted it for, more border patrol, more ICE agents, more detention beds. Can't use it on any of that. It's all for fencing. Okay, fine. So you get that. Now, you might think to yourself, isn't $1.6 billion for fencing when the border is more secure than it's ever been in the history of the country? Sort of a waste of money? Yes, of course it is. But anyway, what happened was this $1.6 billion was agreed to by Democrats and Republicans in the Senate months ago. So now, as we're trying to figure out how to fund the government for the next couple months, Schumer thought that he would say, okay, well, we had an agreement for $1.6 billion with Republicans from before, so let's start there. And we are very reasonable negotiators because we are willing to abide by the agreement we had with Senate Republicans. What we're not abiding by is any kind of money for a wall, not a dime for a wall. And so if Donald Trump wants money for a wall and refuses to fund the government unless he gets that money, he can shut the government down. He's unreasonable. We're trying to negotiate in good faith. That's where all this comes from.
And I would just say that, the clarification, it's not for a wall, it's for fencing, it is so silly to me because you've started out at a position of, you've started out in Trump's world. You've started out saying, we're going to give you some money for enhanced border security when the entire
militarized border.
The militarized border. It's all predicated on the campaign of fear and misinformation that Trump has been leading for years. And so, to me, if you want, we've Schumer has been down this road before. We've come to a few near agreements. Trump's always walked away. If you want money for border security, we're never going to pay for a wall. But if you want money for fencing, if you want money for border security, not for ICE, et cetera, all the caveats that Schumer rightly included, we have to get something. Whether it's help for DACA, whether it's protection for Mueller, whether it's strengthening of ACA, whatever the negotiation is over, however small or big you want to make it, a pretty simple principle Democrats could be very reasonable in upholding is if you want more money for border security when the border has never been more secured, when we've never spent more money on the border before, when it is as secure as it's ever been, you have to give more. It's not just about the number; it's about what you get in exchange. That's it.
Now, it's true that these are all imaginary numbers, that none of this is going to come to fruition, that it's all posturing because Donald Trump is president and he's crazy and he's basically in a position where he's going to say, give me money for the wall or I'm shutting down the government, so it's very likely we're headed for a shutdown. We should just let everyone know. So it's true that it's all imaginary and who cares? It's nothing to get so upset about because it's all posturing, but it seems like it would also be very reasonable for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to say, here's our position. We want to fund the government for the next couple months, a clean continuing resolution, a clean CR that just funds the government with nothing attached. That's very reasonable. Fund the government at current levels. When there's a new Congress that is seated in January, we can talk more about future funding on stuff, talk about immigration, talk about whatever you want. We can negotiate. But our position is just keep the government open for the next couple months. If your position, Donald Trump, is the only way the government's staying open is with a fucking $5 billion wall, then fuck you. Our position is the government. That seems reasonable. So I don't understand why Schumer just didn't offer that position. I don't think you need to throw the $1.6 billion out there.
It reminds me a little bit of when the Obama administration negotiated with Republicans over the debt ceiling and then discovered quickly that you should never do that. That's different. Of course, I understand that it's different, but the lesson there was that even engaging in the debate on the topic was a mistake. That you basically say, we can have a negotiation over immigration, we can have a negotiation over what you want to do for fencing, and we want to protect DACA. We can have that conversation, but trying to tie it to government funding and sort of opening up into that debate to me seems like a mistake. I agree with you.
Okay.
All right. You guys covered the next one, so we're going to skip ahead to today. We're talking about Nancy Pelosi now. Could you guys explain what the rule changes that Nancy Pelosi and the Problem Solvers Caucus have agreed to actually mean, and how bad is it for Democrats?
The Problem Solvers Caucus. We should say, by the way,
there's no problem. The problem the Problem Solvers Caucus wants to solve is staying in power and seeming reasonable to moderate voters, no matter who is hurt and no matter how many conservative ideas are empowered by a new Democratic Congress. The Problem Solvers Caucus and what they're doing, it's like, when Republicans are in charge of the government, conservatives, they hold all the power. But when Democrats are in charge of the government, we also think the conservatives should be in charge.
Even if their motivation was not seeming reasonable or seeming moderate, even if you say, okay, your motivations are pure, you believe that there's too much gridlock and that we need more bipartisanship. Okay, Donald Trump is president. Mitch McConnell is running the Senate. I don't think the problem in Washington and the source of gridlock is the House of Representatives run by Democrats who haven't even started yet. That doesn't seem like where the source of the gridlock is. It's the House that is soon to be run by Nancy Pelosi, but we don't even know what they've done yet. Meanwhile, we have a Senate.
Why won't Speaker Pelosi go back in time
right.
and undo some of the gridlock?
It seems very silly.
Under Paul Ryan.
So it seems like most of these rule changes are fairly toothless and minor. I don't think Democrats should worry. We asked Brian Beutler about this, Crooked Media's editor-in-chief, who was also once a congressional reporter. So Brian sort of identified one rule change that actually has real teeth. It's basically about the process for getting a vote on the floor. So right now, you introduce legislation in the House, it's got to go through a committee. Oftentimes, if the committee is run by one party, the committee can just kill the legislation and then it never sees a vote. So a lot of members say, well, that's not fair. Things should get a vote if they have broad support in the House. Right now, that requires this super majority of Democrats and Republicans, this very high number in the House, to bring some kind of vote to the floor, to force the Speaker to put a piece of legislation on the floor and get a vote. What this says is, if some bill gets 290 sponsors, in the House, then that bill goes on to something called the consensus calendar. Which is just and what
They gotta solve. They gotta solve for whoever's the branding guy at the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Right. The consensus calendar. So I think that person's Mark Penn. So
And then the gridlock goose enters the chamber, and the gridlock goose comes in, and it lays the egg of bipartisanship, and then that egg is cracked, and then they feast upon the egg of going not left or right but forward.
So anything with 290 co-sponsors gets on the consensus calendar, and then the speaker must pick one item from the consensus calendar per session to hold a vote on. This is real. This is the vote.
Here's the thing.
So
And then there's a sorting hat, all right? And it identifies your Patronus. Is that right?
No.
What's the thing that the sorting hat is how you get
Your house.
3 points for Hufflepuff.
Oh.
I never read
That
the
was
book.
a real dig, but if you didn't read the book, it's fine.
But just so you know the math, we're going to end up with 235 votes, Democrats, because it looks like we just won TJ Cox's race. That's number 40.
Can I just admit that I'm a little bummed that Mia Love lost, just because we have such a majority at this point that I wanted Trump to look stupid on that one, but I'm glad we won it.
Lovett was willing to trade a House seat to be able to dunk on Trump for attacking Mia Love.
I just thought, no, I wouldn't be doing the dunking. Mia Love would just be around. There'd be this great thing of Mia Love being like, I guess my death was greatly exaggerated. All that stuff would have been so fun.
I'll take the vote. We're gonna have 235 votes in the House. They have 200.
Can't have any fun anymore. You need every House vote.
So in order for something to get on the consensus calendar, you would need then all 200 Republicans in the House to agree on something, and then you'd need to peel off 90 Democrats. And if the Republicans can do that, yes, then they can force a vote on something in the House, even if Pelosi or not. They can't force a vote. They can force something onto the consensus calendar. So Nancy Pelosi has got to be sitting there thinking, I'm not losing 90 Democrats on anything.
Yeah, there's only 48 members of the so-called Problem Solvers Caucus. So there's only 24 of them that are Democrats. So you're talking about having to peel off a bunch of people. And I think, 32 Democrats voted against Pelosi in the first vote for her to become Speaker. So you're talking about a fact that, you're talking about trying to get a bunch of Democrats. I forgot the is it 290? You're talking about getting 50. You're talking about getting 58 Democrats to vote to screw Pelosi, who just voted for her for Speaker and haven't been part of any of this sort of kerfuffle.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that. And the rest of the rules, we won't go through them all now, but they're all pretty minor, process changes that won't really hurt Democrats, or maybe at the margins. In
committees and stuff. It really is an effort for these problem solvers to they solved the problem all right, which is they'll get the press release that they wanted. Problem solved.
All right.
Okay, moving out of Washington, we have a question from Kara about GM. With the GM shutdowns and layoffs, do you think that those Trump voters will wake up and stop voting against their own self-interest?
I would say two things. One, it's a game of inches. I think that over time, look, we just saw a bunch of people who may have voted for Trump either stay home or vote for Democrats in these House races. No one story is going to make a difference, but I do think whether it's a trade war, whether it's jobs going overseas, whether it's tax cuts for the rich, all of this kind of takes the bloom off the rose with Trump, which is a very positive thing. The second thing I would just say is, and I think it's a big part of the case what we're going to make in 2020. The second thing I'd say about this idea of interests and people voting against their own interests, I would really just, and I've said that too in the past, and I know it's a shorthand, but I would say the question we should always ask is not why are people voting against their own interest, and ask ourselves, why have people valued things outside of their economic interests so much that they're willing to privilege those issues over issues of their sort of bread and butter concern, whether they are wrong about the economic issues or not. They've clearly chosen to privilege a set of issues that are different because that, I think, is ultimately more constructive.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the question is, why do they believe it's not in their interest?
Yeah.
Why do they believe it was in their interest to vote for Trump and not in their interest to vote for a Democrat? And what can Democrats do who are running for office? What can all of us do to persuade them otherwise? I think Democrats have to make this an issue. You see Sherrod Brown out there is doing a fantastic job about this. He's been hitting the GM stuff for a long time. You know, there's an Ohio connection there. But I think this is going to be a big issue. Look, I think a lot of these folks in 2016 thought that, and obviously you can fault them for thinking this, but they believed that Trump would look out for their interests. They believed that Trump would bring these jobs back. For whatever reason, they did. Now, in 2020, there will be 4 years later, and if a lot of these GM-style announcements happen, and people don't see jobs coming back and in fact see jobs leaving, then yes, some of those voters are gettable. Again, a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are Trump fans, and nothing is going to change their mind. But on the margins, as we saw in this election in 2018, on the margins, there are absolutely people who voted for Trump in 16, who voted Democrat in 18, and those people are absolutely gettable for Democrats in 2020. And this kind of thing, GM leaving, and people watching their communities sort of like fall apart and Donald Trump do nothing about it, that's the thing that will actually get them to vote for Democrats in 2020. The people who have already shown that they're willing to break off from Trump.
I'd also just add to that, it's not just about showing people that Trump is not in their economic interests based on the way that he's governed, the way the promises he hasn't kept. One thing we should also be answering for is, why did people not believe Democrats who said this at the beginning? Right? Why was it that there were so many people who doubted what Democrats said about jobs, Democrats said about trade, Democrats said about Midwestern economic issues, that made it possible for people to believe Trump and disbelieve the Democratic mainstream? And I think the good news is, I think there is a kind of, I think we've internalized, I don't think we've done it enough, but I think people understand that there really did need to be a change in how we talked about economic issues going into 2020. And I think you see a lot of potential 2020 Democrats kind of sort of thinking about that out loud.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Another question that's been in the news a lot lately. Climate change. How can we stop climate change from being...
Well, I thought you were about to say, how do we stop climate change? Well, it's a sticky wicket. Sorry, go on.
How much more time do we have?
How do we stop it from being a left-right issue? Left/right. Also, how do we stop the culture of equating what experts like scientists and health professionals think on an issue to what some random person or celebrity thinks? For example, the anti-vaxxer movement, Trump saying he doesn't believe the findings of scientists, stuff like that.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think there's a way to stop it from becoming a left-right issue. You see evangelicals out there talking about the dangers of climate change. You see businesses talking about it. It's not as much the ideology. I don't know how we stop it from being a Democrat-Republican issue. And not a Democrat-Republican issue, a entire world versus the Republican Party.
Including conservative parties in other
conservative
countries.
Parties. Right. This is not a partisan issue, all of it. There is one party in one country on the planet that does not believe in climate change, and that is the Republican Party in the United States.
And just to add to that, by the way, a party that has, even as the science has become more and more clear, has actually moved to the right on this issue, right? You know, we currently have a climate denying Republican who's backed by a lot of climate denying members in Congress. There was a bipartisan climate bill during the 2000s. George W. Bush was getting pushed more and more on this issue. Like, he was terrible on this issue, but like not as bad as current Republicans.
Right. Yeah, no, but I think so. It's going to be impossible to sort of pull these Republican politicians away from their viewpoint. But I think when we're going out and talking to voters, and we're talking to some conservative voters, some moderate voters, I think, first of all, we're now seeing the effects of climate change all around us. We need to talk about those more. I think we need to talk about, a lot of these people think, okay, yeah, maybe it's happening, but if we do something about it, won't it destroy the economy? I think we need to talk more about how, no, in fact, there's plenty of economic opportunities out there for transitioning our economy.
And the report that just came out from the National Climate Assessment said that actually not doing anything about climate change will cause terrible effects across our economy.
Right.
The equivalent of a Great Depression.
And so I think we have to show people a path. And I think, one of the better aspects of the Green New Deal that a lot of Democrats are proposing are, look, we can be honest that this is a tough transition to a clean energy economy. And there are certain sectors of the economy where there won't be those jobs anymore if we transition, and we have to have something to say to those people who might lose their jobs that, like, we're going to support you. There's going to be a federal job guarantee. You're going to be able to do this. There's going to be training. There's going to be benefits, a minimum wage, right? Like, we have to be able to support, we have to be willing to support the transition to a clean energy economy, particularly for the sectors of the economy that may be hurt during the transition.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think I think a jobs guarantee and the job gains and the jobs people can get, I think, is so much more important. I think Democrats have been talking about job training for a very long time, and it rings pretty hollow to people. So I sort of am, whenever I hear a politician talk about job training, I just think, I don't buy it. Nobody's buying it. People have heard it for too long. They heard it on trade for so long.
A federal job guarantee with a guaranteed minimum wage tells you, even if for some reason your job goes away because we're transitioning to a clean energy economy, there will be a guaranteed job with a good living wage for you waiting.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think one thing we need to stop doing is thinking that this is about persuasion. It isn't. We had David Roberts from Vox on Pod Save America, I guess yesterday, and he's been following this. He's one of the best reporters on this issue, and basically, I think these climate reports come out and they're so terrible, but they aren't there to persuade anybody, because if you weren't persuaded by the IPCC report in October, you're not going to be persuaded by the National Climate Assessment in November. So I think that it's more of an organizing challenge than it is about a persuasion challenge, trying to reach people, trying to convince Republicans. There's the Upton Sinclair line, you can't convince somebody of something their livelihood depends on not believing. There's a massive propaganda campaign that exists right now to try to make sure we do nothing on climate. Pointing that out, countering that, fighting that in every way we can, I think, is the most important thing we can do, because it's not a left-right issue because people sincerely disagree. It's a left-right issue because there is a concerted effort to distort our democracy.
What do we got next?
All right, we're moving to 2020 next. This question is, how do we rumble up support for potential 2020 candidates to generate an engaged electorate similar to how Obama did in 2008?
So here's what you do. First, in a sort of kiln of American hope, you make a once-in-a-generation political figure.
I think that...
Well, I'm loose today. This is good.
I do not want to set that bar. No, I think that...
A kiln of America. I had nothing. All right, sorry, go on.
There's two reasons that Obama won in 2008. One, two main reasons. One is that he was a once-in-a-generation political candidate talent. But the other was and it's something that we identified early. Maybe you guys did not identify it as much. That
when I was on the Hillary campaign?
There was a hunger for change, for something completely different, some completely new.
John, you seem to have forgotten that strength plus experience equals change.
And what Obama identified was that it was not just change from 8 years of George Bush, but it was change from everything that had been going on in Washington. That was not only a message about Hillary, but about who would become his vice president, Biden, Dodd, the rest of the crew that had been in Washington for a long time. So anyway, I do think that the 2020 is a change election, right? 2018 was basically a change election, but 2020 is going to be even more so. So much of the energy around whoever the nominee is in 2020 will be around the idea that people are desperate for change from what they have been seeing for Donald Trump for the last 4 years. So that energy will be there. The question then is, what candidate best represents change?
I would also point out that in the last dozen years, every 2 years we've had an election. Most of them have been change elections.
Yeah.
And it does tell you something about why someone, if you step back far enough, you say, well, hold on a second. How could someone like Trump emerge? Well, if an election after election, people are voting for the other, they keep trying to get something new. They keep trying to get something new, and they continuously feel like they're not getting it. It's why the door opens for someone like Trump. And I think it's a good reminder to anyone considering running for president that if you sound like people who have run for president before, you're making a mistake, whether it's trying to sound like Barack Obama or sounding too much like a typical politician in Washington. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, because the question for all these 2020 candidates is not only how can you be different than Trump and how can you, because almost everyone running is going to be extremely different than Donald Trump, right? Mm-hmm. The question is, what was it about the Democratic Party that people also don't like? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily lead you to, I don't think it leads you at all to some like, oh, I should be more moderate or centrist. It could also be, I should be further left than the Democratic Party has been. It could be, I think the Democratic Party is too in bed with special interests, whatever it may be, or I think Democrats all sound the same and they all sound like they've been in Washington for too long, whatever it may be, I think every 2020 candidate should think to themselves, okay, mostly people want to get rid of Trump and get rid of Republicans, but what is it out there that makes people not quite in love with Democrats?
That's such a nice way to put it.
Not quite in love.
Yeah, how do we close this deal that we haven't been able to close at all? Yeah, and I would just also say that I am right now much more interested in Democrats, all of them, the 300 or 400 considering running for president, to open the sails and don't think very big, be willing to say unexpected things, try to say things in a way that maybe might be risky because that's not the way Democrats have talked in the past. Take those chances now, because to me, there's plenty of time to figure out who's best to spar with Donald Trump on a debate stage. What I'm interested right now is who is answering this deeper question. What is it that made it possible for someone like Donald Trump to emerge? What was so off about where Democrats were? And we can argue about Hillary Clinton all day, but it's more than that. What is it that made the Democratic brand so flawed that there were enough people in America willing to pull the lever for someone like Donald Trump? And I don't think any excuse is worth making. There are plenty of reasonable objections that have nothing to do with Democratic policies, but I would like people to be thinking about that purely on a policy level right now, because that's the time. This is the time for that.
Cool. We have some rapid fire questions to
Let's
close
do
it
it.
out. This one is from Devour a Cupcake. Great name. After the midterm election, how do you all feel? Was there a blue wave?
Fuck yes, there was a blue wave.
Hey, John.
Oh.
Oh, God.
Hey, John.
This is getting into another question.
This is the next question.
Yeah.
How does a female sheep at an Indonesian resort greet visitors? It's a Bali U wave. But John.
They're so bad that it's hard to guess them.
But John, how would that sheep bleat a hello from a British toilet? It's a Balu wave. But John.
Yep.
What would happen if that wastewater runoff from the loo caused a red tide? Well, you'd have an algae bloom wave.
Did
Travis write these for you?
Oh, tough hit.
I just want to thank
Travis is funny.
Travis Helwig, just a great comedy writer, all-around great guy, for writing so many of these blue wave jokes. I'm so grateful to him. You know what it is? He brings that great vibe from we got Travis from the Capitol steps. And he brings that great kind of love of show with a love of politics. He puts them together. And I think that's great. And he doesn't go along for this whole weird left Twitter thing. He doesn't, honestly, I've shown him some pretty great Twitter feeds, and it's right over his head. He's sort of a classics guy.
Capital steps. Yeah, it's a blue wave.
It's a blue wave.
We won 40 seats.
40 seats.
Best performance since Watergate. Best performance by either party in modern history. 63 million votes we could be at the end. 63 million votes for Democrats when all is said and done, which is about the same number of votes that Donald Trump received in his presidential election in 2016.
What is it? Seven pickups on governorships.
That's right.
We made up for. We lost 1,000 seats locally over 8 years. We made about a third of it back in one election. We passed Medicaid expansion in Utah, Idaho, one other place. Nebraska. Raised the minimum wage in Arkansas and Missouri. Protected. We re-enfranchised felons in Florida. Fixed a bunch of shit in a bunch of ballot
People are
measures
going to be
across the
smoking
country.
weed in Michigan.
It's going to be so much weed. You're not going to be able to see. It's going to be a cloud of marijuana smoke as you look down and try to see the beloved Wolverines facing off against the Spartans.
There you go. Automatic voter registration.
Also that.
For the Spartans and the Wolverines.
Wolverines and Spartans, they may not agree on the field, but they come together and they vote on the field of
Let's
democracy.
talk about the Senate, too. Now that we just had the Mississippi election, we're done with the Senate races. The Republicans started off with 52 seats right after Donald Trump won, and now they have 53.
I'd also point out...
They had about 10 targets. They had 10 states where Donald Trump won by a lot, and they went they only got 4 of them.
We held on in Montana, which was a tough
We flipped 2
House.
seats. We lost
Tough
4
seat.
seats.
I'd also say too, Mike Espy may have lost to that racist lady, but the fact that like we just had a competitive election in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Like
she didn't win. She underperformed.
Underperformed. I mean, it was a 6-point victory as of right now, but
I think so.
But in one of the reddest states in the country. It's a wave. Is that it?
I was blue waving.
What do you call it when a bunch of Michigan fans get together and celebrate in their stadium? A Go Blue wave.
Oh.
You're welcome.
That was from Elijah.
I don't like it when other people do my bits.
Is there anything else, Priyanka?
Yeah, we got a few more.
Oh.
This one's from Janice. Why do you guys cuss so much? Really, your mothers must be appalled.
My mother is appalled, and every time I swear, she brings it up. She actually
winces.
she said, "I get that you do it once in a while during the podcast because you're just talking and it just happens." She really doesn't like when Crooked Media tweets swear words when they end up on Facebook, when they end up on the Twitter feed. So I'm actually trying to cut down.
Elijah cussing.
Ooh.
It is Elijah.
I am.
It's not me, Mom. It's Elijah.
I think it's fine if it's motivated. I think it's a good thing to. Are we overusing them? Is it not natural? Where
Perhaps.
is it? I found myself over Thanksgiving. I was like with my mother, and all of a sudden I like dropped an F-bomb. I'm like, maybe I am cursing too much at work.
I think I might be. I'm going to try to cut back a little bit.
All right, rapid fire question from me. I'm wondering, are you team hot duck or big cow? Or do you not know what I'm talking about?
I only know what you're talking about in terms of the big cow. I
saw
don't know
a
what
big
the hot
cow.
dog
What's
is.
The
a hot dog?
hot duck is Tanya's Slack thing. You guys have all seen
Oh, I
the
saw
hot
that.
duck.
Tanya, but why did Tanya choose that?
Because it's the hot duck.
What's a hot duck?
Oh, God. For
Travis
someone
is
who's
shaking
on
his
the
head.
internet so much, you really
I'm
should.
trying to just read the news.
They did
you know?
surgery on a grape.
Oh, God. And that's the live stream.
Blue wave.